Victoria Hayes died on the same day she asked if my bed was big enough for two. The words still echo 8 hours later as I sit in the third pew of St. Michael's Cathedral, watching six pallbearers carry her polished mahogany casket down the center aisle. The question had arrived like a lightning strike that Friday afternoon, delivered in her office doorway, with a half smile that suggested she already knew the answer but needed to hear it anyway. My hands had frozen on the quarterly reports I'd been holding, papers suddenly weightless compared to the gravity of what she was asking. Only if you're the one beside me, Victoria, I'd meant every word. I know. 35 years on this earth, and I'd never been more certain of anything, despite the professional chaos such honesty should have triggered. But Victoria's smile had shifted, then something behind her CEO armor, cracking just enough to let me glimpse the woman underneath, vulnerable, lonely, terrified of rejection. She'd nodded once, a small movement that felt monumental, and promised we'd talk tomorrow at Riverside Park. There were things she needed to tell me about Rowan. My daughter sits beside me now, 18 years old and breaking apart in ways I can't fix. Her mascara has run in dark streams down both cheeks, hands clutching a framed photograph of Victoria from last year's company picnic. They'd taken it together at the dessert table, Victoria's arm around Rowan's shoulders, like they were old friends instead of employer and employee's daughter. The frame trembles as another sob racks through Rowan's chest. I'd never made it to Riverside Park. Victoria had collapsed in her apartment at 11:30 that night, alone, clutching her phone with 911, barely dialed before her undiagnosed heart condition stole every remaining second. By the time paramedics found her, the woman who'd asked about my bed was already gone, taking her secrets with her into whatever comes after. The priest's voice drones through memorized platitudes about loss and legacy, but I can't focus on his words. All I hear is Victoria's final question looping endlessly through my mind, like a song stuck on repeat. She'd wanted to tell me something about Rowan, something important enough to schedule a private meeting away from Hayes Industries, away from prying eyes and office gossip, something that died with her before I could learn what it meant. Rowan's whisper cuts through my spiral of guilt and confusion, her voice raw from crying. Dad, why does life take away the good ones? I have no answer that won't sound hollow, so I pull her closer and let her cry into my shoulder, while the cathedral's pipe organ begins its mournful dirge. Victoria Hayes had built a $200 million technology empire from nothing, carved her name into Silicon Valley history through sheer determination and brilliant strategic instinct. She'd mentored dozens of young engineers, funded scholarships for underprivileged students, revolutionized supply chain logistics with software that made the impossible routine. And somehow, in the middle of all that achievement, she'd found time to notice a struggling, single father trying to give his adopted daughter a better life. 6 months ago, I'd been a project manager buried in the middle layers of Hayes Industries' organizational chart, talented enough to keep my job but invisible enough to avoid executive attention. My hands still carried the calluses of the mechanic I'd been before college, before teaching myself management through night classes, and borrowed textbooks while raising Rowan alone. No MBA, no Ivy League pedigree, just competence earned through solving real problems with practical solutions. Then Victoria had appeared in the manufacturing facility during a routine inspection, watching me troubleshoot a production line failure that had stumped the engineering team for 3 days. She'd stood silent in the corner for 20 minutes, those sharp green eyes tracking every adjustment I made, every instruction I gave to my crew. When the machines finally roared back to life, she'd approached with a question that changed everything. You don't have an MBA, do you, Ashford? No, ma'am, I learned by doing, not reading. Her smile had been genuine for the first time I had ever seen. Good. I'm tired of MBAs who can't fix anything real. That conversation had been the beginning of something I still don't fully understand. Victoria had started seeking me out after that day, appearing in my office with questions that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with life. She'd asked about Rowan's college plans, my late nights studying for certifications, the difficulty of being a single parent in an industry that demanded 60-hour weeks. And I'd answered honestly, too surprised by her interest to guard my words the way I should have. The connection grew slowly, carefully, like two people afraid of wanting something they shouldn't. Victoria was my boss, the woman who signed my paychecks and held my career in her perfectly manicured hands. I was an employee 20 rungs below her on the corporate ladder, a man with grease permanently under his fingernails, and a daughter who needed stability more than I needed romance. Every professional boundary screamed at us to stay apart. But hearts don't follow organizational charts. 3 months after that first conversation, Victoria had promoted me to senior project manager with a 40% raise and responsibilities that made my head spin. The jump from 75,000 to 105,000 annually meant Rowan could attend Stanford without drowning in student loans, meant I could finally stop calculating every grocery purchase down to the penny. It meant security, the kind I'd been chasing since the day I'd signed adoption papers for an 8-year-old girl whose parents had died in a highway collision. The promotion had also unleashed a firestorm of office gossip that followed me through every hallway. Colleagues whispered about inappropriate relationships and favoritism, their eyes tracking me with barely disguised contempt. Sterling Blackwood, the chief financial officer, whose own firing for embezzlement was weeks away, had made his feelings public during a board meeting, questioning Victoria's judgment in front of shareholders. She'd shut him down with ice in her voice and steel in her spine, defending my merit while carefully avoiding any mention of what was growing between us outside working hours. Those stolen lunches had become my favorite part of each week. Victoria would suggest we discuss projects over sandwiches from the deli across the street, then spend the entire hour asking about Rowan instead. She'd wanted to know everything: what books my daughter loved, whether she'd inherited my mechanical aptitude, if she was happy with me as her father. The questions had felt oddly specific, intensely personal, like Victoria was memorizing details for some future purpose I couldn't identify. Why did you adopt Rowan? Memory of that question still sits heavy in my chest. We'd been sitting in my truck in the parking lot, half-eaten sandwiches forgotten on the dashboard, and Victoria's eyes had held something fierce and fragile at once. Her parents were my best friends from the auto shop where I worked. They died in a crash when she was 8. I couldn't let her go into the system. Victoria had gone very still, her hand frozen halfway to her coffee cup. "You're a good man, Garrett." Not everyone would have made that choice, but I'd seen something flicker across her face in that moment: recognition or regret or some emotion I couldn't name. She'd left quickly after that, claiming an urgent call, but her coffee had still been steaming untouched when she'd practically fled my truck. 2 weeks ago, that same expression had returned when Victoria learned exactly where I'd adopted Rowan. We'd been in her office reviewing quarterly projections when she'd asked the question with studied casualness, like it didn't matter even though her knuckles had gone white gripping her pen. "Which agency did you use? St. Catherine's Adoption Services. They handled everything after the Thompsons died." The pen had snapped in her hand, black ink bleeding across the financial reports neither of us was reading anymore. Victoria had made some excuse about needing to leave early, and I'd watched her practically run from the office like demons were chasing her heels. She'd been different after that day, nervous, distracted, checking her phone constantly, like she was waiting for news that would change everything. Then came last Friday and the question about beds large enough for 2 people. The funeral ends with more organ music and platitudes about heaven that I want to believe but can't quite trust. Rowan and I file out with the other mourners into California sunshine that feels obscene on a day meant for darkness. Across the cemetery, I spot a woman who looks enough like Victoria to make my breath catch. Same sharp cheekbones, same auburn hair, pulled back severely, same air of controlled authority barely masking something wounded underneath. She approaches with purpose, her black dress expensive and perfectly tailored, her eyes red from crying in private, where no one could see weakness. "Mr. Ashford, I'm Evelyn Hayes, Victoria's sister. I'm so sorry for your loss." I'm surprised Victoria never mentioned her sister, but grief seems to have brought Evelyn out of whatever estrangement kept them apart. We exchanged the usual condolences, meaningless words that bounce off the wall of shock, still protecting me from the full weight of Victoria's absence. But when Evelyn's gaze shifts to Rowan, something changes in her expression, a flicker of recognition that mirrors what I'd seen in Victoria's face during our last real conversation. Your daughter Evelyn's voice carries an odd note I can't identify. She's beautiful. Rowan manages a tearful thank you while I struggle to understand why Evelyn is staring at my daughter like she's seeing a ghost. Before I can ask, a man in an expensive charcoal suit interrupts with the kind of purposeful stride that suggests lawyers or bad news. "Mr. Ashford, I'm Elliot Montgomery, Victoria's attorney. I need you to come to my office Monday morning at 9. Ms. Hayes left specific instructions. Instructions for what Montgomery's expression gives nothing away, Professional neutrality worn like armor against questions. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details here, but it's crucial you attend. Please come alone. He hands me a business card with an address in downtown San Francisco and disappears back into the crowd of mourners before I can press for answers. Rowan tugs at my sleeve, her eyes puffy and confused. What does he want, Dad? I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll find out Monday. The weekend passes in a blur of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors and Rowan cycling between grief and numbness. She holds up in her room with Victoria's photograph, the one from the company picnic where they're both laughing at some shared joke I wasn't part of. Saturday drags by in the slow motion while I pace our small house, Victoria's question about Rowan echoing through my skull with increasing urgency. What had she needed to tell me? Why schedule a private meeting just to discuss my daughter? Victoria had known Rowan worked part-time at the coffee shop near Hayes Industries headquarters, had stopped in often enough that Rowan could recite her order from memory. Americano, no sugar, always with a generous tip, and a few minutes of genuine conversation that made my daughter feel seen by someone important. They'd bonded over technology and dreams and the peculiar loneliness of being female in male-dominated spaces. Rowan had talked about Victoria constantly during dinner, sharing advice the CEO had offered about standing firm against people who underestimated her intelligence, about choosing passion over security when picking a career path, about the importance of education in building the life you wanted rather than settling for the life circumstances handed you. Make sure she goes to Stanford. Education is everything. Victoria had said that to me 6 months ago with an intensity that suggested personal experience with missed opportunities. At the time, I'd assumed she was speaking, generally encouraging me to support Rowan's ambitions, the way Victoria's own family perhaps hadn't. But now, with the benefit of hindsight and growing dread, I wonder if there was more behind those words than mentorship. Monday morning arrives too quickly and too slowly at once. I leave Rowan at school with promises to pick her up early, then drive to Montgomery's office in the financial district where buildings scrape clouds and parking cost more per hour than I used to make per day. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor gives me too much time to imagine worst-case scenarios, each more improbable than the last. Montgomery's receptionist escorts me to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The lawyer appears moments later carrying a manila envelope sealed with red wax that looks antique and ominous. He sets it on the polished mahogany table between us like it might explode. Ms. Hayes gave me this envelope 3 weeks ago with strict instructions. In the event of her death, you and only you were to receive its contents. I haven't read it myself, 3 weeks, right around the time Victoria learned where I'd adopted Rowan, right when her behavior shifted from warm to frantic. My hands shake as I break the wax seal and withdraw several sheets of expensive stationery covered in Victoria's precise handwriting. The first line stops my heart. Garrett, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I never got to tell you in person. Rowan is my daughter. The conference room tilts sideways. Montgomery's voice asking if I'm all right sounds distant, muffled by the roaring in my ears, as I force myself to continue reading words that reshape my entire reality. 18 years ago, I was 19, pregnant and terrified. My parents gave me an ultimatum: give up the baby or lose everything. I chose what I thought was best for her, a chance at a better life than I could provide, and as a broke teenager, with no support system and no prospects. I held her for 2 hours after she was born, counted her tiny fingers, memorized her face, then signed the papers that broke my heart, but promised her a future. I named her Lily in my mind, even though I knew her adoptive parents would choose something else. The nurse at St. Catherine's promised to tell the new family I'd chosen that name, hoping it might stick. When I discovered 18 years later that you'd named her Rowan, another nature name, another symbol of strength and growth, I wanted to believe the universe was telling me we were always meant to find each other again. I've been searching for 3 years, ever since Hayes Industries became stable enough that I could afford private investigators without risking the company. I gave them everything I had, St. Catherine's Adoption Services, March 15, 2007, the hospital where she was born. It took them 33 months to find the trail to track her through the system to the Thompsons, then to you after they died. When Callum Porter handed me the file 2 weeks ago and I saw her photograph next to yours, I realized I'd been talking to my own daughter at that coffee shop for 6 months without knowing. The cruelty of that timing still tears me apart. All those mornings I stopped in for Americanos I didn't need manufacturing reasons to see her smile, to hear her talk about her dreams and ambitions, and the father who'd stepped up when tragedy struck. You gave her everything I couldn't, Garrett. You gave her stability and love, and a man who chose her deliberately rather than abandoning her to chance. I wanted to tell you both. I planned to that Friday when I asked about your bed. That question wasn't just about romance, though. God knows I wanted that too. I was asking if there was room in your life for me to be part of Rowan's world, maybe eventually, as something more than the CEO who gave her career advice over coffee. But I was terrified you'd say no. Terrified she'd hate me for giving her away. Terrified of ruining the family you'd built from the wreckage of other people's mistakes. So I wrote this letter as insurance because my mother died of sudden heart failure at 40, and I've been living on borrowed time without treatment, choosing to use every remaining day searching for my daughter rather than extending a life that felt empty without her in it. If you're reading this, I ran out of days before I ran out of courage. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for so many things. But please, Garrett, tell Rowan I loved her every single day of her life, even when I didn't know her name or her face or the remarkable person she'd become. Tell her I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to say it myself. The letter continues with legal details and instructions I can't process through the static filling my head. Rowan is Victoria's daughter. My boss was my daughter's biological mother. The woman I'd fallen for was the woman who'd given birth to the girl I'd raised for 10 years. The cosmic improbability of it threatens to crack something fundamental in my understanding of how the universe works. Montgomery waits patiently while I read the letter 3 more times, each pass revealing new layers of Victoria's pain and desperation. She'd known for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of watching Rowan without being able to claim her. 2 weeks of careful planning for a conversation that never happened. 2 weeks of choosing each day to stay alive long enough to tell the truth, even as her heart literally gave out under the strain. Mr. Ashford, I know this is a tremendous shock. Take whatever time you need. Did Victoria want to take Rowan away from me? The question emerges harsh and defensive, but Montgomery doesn't flinch. He slides another document across the table. This one typed and notarized. No. She wanted to ask your permission to be part of Rowan's life as a friend and mentor first, with the hope of eventually revealing the truth if you both agreed. Victoria had no interest in disrupting your family. She just wanted to know her daughter before she died. Before she died. The phrase carries the weight of Victoria's foreknowledge, her decision to prioritize finding Rowan over treating a condition that might have bought her decades instead of weeks. She'd chosen her daughter over her own survival, gambling everything on a reunion that fate had stolen at the last possible second. There's more you need to know. Victoria updated her will 2 weeks ago, the same day she received the investigator's report. Montgomery produces another sheaf of papers, these bearing corporate letterhead and legal jargon I struggled to parse through the fog of shock. Hayes Industries is being placed under your leadership as acting CEO until the board of directors makes a permanent decision regarding succession. Additionally, Ms. Hayes established a trust fund containing $10 million for Rowan's benefit, accessible when she turns 25. There are also personal effects Victoria wished Rowan to have when she's ready, and a sealed video to be given to your daughter at your discretion. Acting CEO, $10 million. A video message from a mother Rowan never knew was searching for her. The numbers and responsibilities pile up faster than I can process each one, adding weight to a decision I'm not qualified to make. I can't run a $200 million company. I don't have the credentials or experience, or Victoria believed you were the only person who could lead Hayes Industries according to her values rather than quarterly profit margins. She chose you deliberately, Mr. Ashford, just as you chose Rowan. The board may contest it, but the will is ironclad. She made very certain of that. What do I tell Rowan? What do I tell my daughter about her mother? Montgomery's expression softens into something almost human behind his professional mask. That's between you and your conscience. Victoria left the choice in your hands because she trusted your judgment more than anyone's, including her own. I leave the office an hour later with my truck full of documents and video files and the terrible knowledge that changes everything. Victoria Hayes isn't just the boss I'd been falling for, isn't just the CEO who'd given me opportunities I'd never dreamed possible. She's Rowan's mother, the woman who'd carried my daughter for 9 months and then let her go out of love and desperation and impossible circumstances. And now she's dead, taking with her any chance for Rowan to know the woman who'd named her Lily and searched for 3 years to find her again. The drive home takes 40 minutes but feels like hours. I rehearse a dozen different conversations, trying to find words that won't destroy Rowan while she's still raw from losing someone she considered a friend and mentor. How do you tell an 18-year-old that the CEO she admired was actually the mother who'd given her up for adoption? How do you explain that the woman who'd encouraged her dreams had been watching her own daughter grow up from a distance, desperate to claim her but too afraid of rejection? To speak the truth, Rowan is waiting when I pull into our driveway, backpack slung over one shoulder and confusion written across her features. I'd promised to pick her up at school, but it's already after 3 and clearly I've forgotten in the chaos of earth-shattering revelations. Dad, how was the lawyer meeting? The question hangs in the late afternoon air while I make the decision that will haunt me for months. I can't tell her. Not now. Not when she's about to take the SAT and submit college applications and needs stability more than truth. Not when I'm still reeling from the letter's contents and can't possibly guide her through grief I barely understand myself. Complicated sweetheart. Can we talk inside? We settle at the kitchen table where we've shared thousands of meals and conversations where I've helped her with homework and college essays and all the normal problems that suddenly feel trivial compared to this. Rowan looks at me with trust I don't deserve, waiting for whatever news I'm about to deliver. Victoria left me in charge of Hayes Industries temporarily, until the board finds a permanent replacement. Her eyes go wide with shock and something like pride. What, Dad, you're going to be CEO, acting CEO, just until they can hire someone more qualified. But that's incredible. Victoria must have really trusted you. The words lance through me like heated wire. She did, and I'm betraying that trust by hiding the truth, even as I honor it, by protecting Rowan from information that could shatter her during crucial months. The contradiction tears at something fundamental inside me, but I push forward with the partial truth that feels like comprehensive lies. She thought I understood the company's values, that I'd protect what she built. Rowan beams at me with uncomplicated happiness, and I hate myself for letting her believe this is simple promotion rather than cosmic revelation. Did Victoria ever talk to you about me, specifically when you saw her at the coffee shop? My daughter's expression shifts, thoughtful, reaching back through months of interactions I'll now have to reinterpret through the lens of biological connection. All the time, actually. She asked about my college plans, what I wanted to study, if I was happy with you as my dad. It was kind of intense sometimes, like she really cared about the answers instead of just making conversation. What did you tell her about being happy? Rowan doesn't hesitate. I told her you were the best father anyone could ask for. That I knew I was adopted, but you'd never made me feel like I was anything other than completely wanted. The words should bring comfort, but instead twist the knife deeper. Victoria had known Rowan was happy, had heard confirmation that her daughter had found the love and stability teenage mother Victoria couldn't provide. Maybe that knowledge had brought peace in her final days, or maybe it had only sharpened the regret of giving away something precious that she'd been too young and scared to keep. I'm going to miss her, Dad. Victoria was always so nice to me. I pull Rowan into a hug before she can see the tears threatening to spill from my own eyes. I know, sweetheart. I'm going to miss her too. That night, after Rowan goes to bed, I sit in my room reading Victoria's letter for the 10th time, memorizing every word like they might disappear if I don't hold them in my mind. The bed she'd asked about, our bed, the one that could have been ours, if fate had granted us more than abbreviated weeks, mocks me with its empty expanse. I'd told her yes, told her there was room if she was the one beside me, and I'd meant it with every fiber of my being. But she'd needed more than romantic space. She'd needed room in my life, for the truth about Rowan needed permission to be the mother she'd been forced to abandon 18 years ago. And I'd been too blind to see what she was really asking, too focused on the surface question to recognize the depths beneath it. My phone rings at 11:30, unknown number flashing across the screen. Against better judgment, I answer, and Sterling Blackwood's voice slithers through the speaker with barely concealed contempt. Ashford, we need to talk about Victoria's will. I'm filing a challenge with the board of directors first thing tomorrow morning. On what grounds you had an inappropriate relationship with Ms. Hayes that influenced her judgment? I'm moving to void the CEO appointment and install proper leadership that actually understands corporate governance. I've been expecting this ever since Montgomery mentioned board resistance, but the confirmation still sends adrenaline spiking through my system. Victoria's will is legal and binding. You can challenge all you want, but I'm honoring her wishes. We'll see about that. Enjoy your weekend, Ashford, because Monday morning, I'm taking back what should have been mine. He disconnects before I can respond, leaving me staring at my phone and calculating how many ways this can spiral into disaster. Sterling Blackwood has spent decades climbing corporate ladders and cultivating board relationships. He'll paint me as an unqualified interloper who seduced the boss for professional advancement, will use every weapon in his considerable arsenal to discredit both my merit and Victoria's judgment. And I'll have to defend myself without revealing the real reason Victoria promoted me, without exposing Rowan to a truth she isn't ready to handle. The video Montgomery gave me sits in my desk drawer like unexploded ordnance waiting for the right moment to detonate and reshape our lives forever. Victoria's face fills the thumbnail when I preview it on my laptop. Younger, healthier eyes wet with tears, she was too proud to shed in front of anyone living. She'd made this video a year ago, according to the timestamp, long before she'd found Rowan creating a message for a daughter who might never see it. The impulse to watch it now nearly overwhelms me, but this isn't mine to see first. This belongs to Rowan when she's ready, when I've found the courage Victoria died searching for. 3 weeks pass in controlled chaos. The board meeting Sterling demanded happens on a Tuesday, 12 executives in expensive suits sizing me up like a problem requiring solution. I present Victoria's documented reasoning for my appointment performance reviews, spanning 3 years concrete examples of my leadership during crisis situations. Her written explanation that Hayes Industries needed someone who understood both the technology and the people who built it, rather than another MBA focused solely on shareholder value. Sterling counters with insinuations and character assassination, painting me as a gold digger who'd manipulated a lonely woman's affections for professional gain. The board splits predictably down ideological lines, those who'd worked closely with Victoria defending her judgment, those who'd clashed with her progressive policies siding with Sterling's traditionalist approach. The stalemate holds for 3 hours before Evelyn Hayes arrives unannounced, sweeping into the conference room with Victoria's authoritative presence wrapped in her own particular intensity. She'd flown in from Seattle specifically for this meeting, she explains, because her sister had called her the night before she died. Victoria told me about Mr. Ashford, about how he reminded her of the person she'd been before success made her cautious. She trusted him with her life's work because she believed he'd protect what mattered rather than what was profitable. If you void this will, you're not just disrespecting my sister's wishes, you're proving you never understood her at all. The speech sways 2 board members into my column enough to create a majority that votes to uphold Victoria's will pending a 90-day performance review. Sterling storms out promising litigation and ruin, but Montgomery assures me the legal ground is solid enough to withstand any challenge. I'm walking to my truck when Evelyn catches up with me in the parking garage, her heels clicking sharp echoes against concrete. Mr. Ashford, I need to talk to you about Rowan. My blood turns to ice water. How much does Victoria's sister know? What did they discuss during that final phone call while I was sleeping and unaware that I had mere hours left before everything changed? What about her? Evelyn's eyes hold the same fierce recognition I'd seen at the funeral, the same unsettling familiarity that suggests she sees Victoria's features reflected in Rowan's face. Victoria told me she'd found her daughter, that she was planning to tell both of you that weekend. I didn't know the details until I read her letter after she died, but I knew she'd been searching for years. That she'd built everything specifically to create a legacy worthy of the child she'd been forced to give away. You know then, about the adoption. I know Victoria gave birth at 19 to a baby girl she named Lily before signing the adoption papers. I know she spent 15 years building Hayes Industries so she'd have the resources to find her daughter. And I know from the way Rowan looks at you that she has no idea the woman who gave her career advice at a coffee shop was actually her biological mother. The observation lands like accusation, even though Evelyn's tone stays neutral. I'm trying to protect her during a vulnerable time. She's got SATs and college applications, and she deserves to know her mother loved her enough to spend 18 years trying to find her again. Evelyn's voice sharpens with conviction that brooks no argument. I understand your hesitation, Mr. Ashford, but secrets like this have a way of destroying families when the truth eventually surfaces. And it will surface, these things always do. When she's ready, I promise, but not now. Not when she's already grieving someone she considered a mentor and friend. Evelyn studies me for a long moment before nodding acceptance. There's also a video Victoria made for Rowan, a message she recorded a year ago in case she died before finding her daughter. Have you watched it? No. That's for Rowan when the time is right. Good. Because once she sees it, there's no going back to comfortable ignorance. Make sure she's truly ready before you hand her that kind of truth. Evelyn leaves me with her business card and an invitation to call anytime I need guidance navigating the impossible situation Victoria's death has created. I pocket the card and drive home to where Rowan is waiting with takeout Chinese and questions about whether I'll keep my job past the 90-day review period. Of course I will. I lie because what else can I say? That I'm drowning in responsibilities. I never sought keeping secrets that corrode my integrity, and terrified that when she finally learns the truth, she'll hate me for choosing temporary peace over painful honesty. A month becomes 2, becomes 3, and the secret metastasizes like cancer. I walk through Hayes Industries headquarters, issuing directives and approving budgets and attending meetings where people call me CEO Ashford with varying degrees of respect or resentment. Sterling has disappeared into whatever hole bitter executives crawl into after their hostile takeovers fail, but his absence feels temporary rather than permanent. Rowan's SAT scores arrive in mid-November, perfect 800 on Mathematics 790, on verbal scores that guarantee admission to any program she wants. She applies to Stanford early decision because it's been her dream since before I adopted her, since the Thompsons first planted the seeds of academic ambition that I've watered for a decade. We celebrate at the Italian restaurant where I took her for her 16th birthday, and she asks about Victoria with the fondness reserved for people who made positive impacts during formative years. I deflect with stories about the CEO's business acumen while hiding the truth that your mentor was your mother, and she searched for you until her heart literally couldn't take another day. The lies accumulate weight until I can barely stand upright beneath them. December arrives cold and clear. Northern California's version of winter settling over the Bay Area in morning fog and afternoon sunshine. I'm in my office reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant buzzes with news that the board of directors needs me in an emergency meeting. The 90-day review period ended last week with grudging approval of my continued leadership, so this can't be about my performance. I walk into the conference room to find the same 12 executives who debated my worthiness 3 months ago, but this time they're not divided. They're unanimous in their expressions of concern, and Montgomery sits at the head of the table with documents I recognize from my meeting in his office. Mr. Ashford, we've received information about your relationship with Victoria Hayes that requires immediate clarification. My stomach drops as Sterling Blackwood emerges from the corner where he'd been waiting like a predator in tall grass. He's holding photocopies of Victoria's letter, my letter. The private message she'd sealed and intended for my eyes only. Somehow he's obtained it, violated the sanctity of her final words, and weaponized her confession for his corporate coup. It seems Ms. Hayes had quite the secret. Sterling's voice drips triumph and malice in equal measure. A secret child she gave up for adoption, a secret search that led her to your doorstep, a secret relationship that went far beyond professional boundaries. Tell me, Ashford, did you know your daughter was Victoria's biological child before or after you started sleeping with the boss? The accusation detonates in the conference room with the force of shaped charges designed for maximum structural damage. Board members stare at me with shock and calculation, instantly reinterpreting every decision through the lens of scandal and manipulation. I should defend myself, should explain the timeline and context and Victoria's intentions, but rage blanks every coherent thought from my mind. Where did you get that letter? Sterling smiles like a shark scenting blood. Let's just say Victoria's assistant was more loyal to proper governance than emotional sentimentality. The point is, you've been hiding material information from this board for 3 months while pretending your appointment was based purely on merit. That constitutes fraud, Mr. Ashford, and grounds for immediate termination. The room erupts into overlapping voices, arguing procedure and ethics and legal liability. Montgomery tries to restore order, but the damage is comprehensive and irreversible. They know about Rowan, now know that Victoria's final act was elevating the father of her secret child while planning a reunion that never happened. And worse, so much worse, they're going to make this public. The press will devour it, splash it across business sections and gossip columns alike, and Rowan will learn the truth from strangers rather than from me. She'll discover her mother's identity through leaked documents and hostile interrogation instead of through careful conversation in Victoria's video message. I've failed both of them spectacularly. The conference room descends into tactical warfare disguised as parliamentary procedure. Montgomery calls for recess to review the legal implications of Sterling's document theft, but the damage radiates outward faster than containment protocols can stop it. 3 board members demand my immediate resignation, 4 more argue for suspended leadership pending investigation, and the remaining 5 sit silent with the calculating expressions of politicians waiting to see which direction the wind blows before committing. Sterling leans against the mahogany credenza with arms crossed and satisfaction radiating from every pore. I've already contacted our PR firm and the legal team. By 5 o'clock today, every major business publication will know Victoria Hayes had a secret daughter and promoted the girl's adoptive father to CEO. The optics are catastrophic, gentlemen, and the only way to salvage Hayes Industries' reputation is immediate decisive action. You stole confidential attorney-client communications. That's a felony regardless of what they contain. Elliot Montgomery's voice cuts through the chaos with surgical precision, but Sterling waves off the threat like swatting gnats. I obtained documents relevant to corporate governance through proper channels. Victoria's assistant provided them voluntarily when she realized the company's leadership had been compromised by personal entanglements. You can threaten lawsuits all you want, but the facts remain. Ashford knew his daughter was Hayes's biological child and concealed that information while accepting her appointment. That's textbook conflict of interest. I didn't know until after she died. The words emerge hoarse from my constricted throat, truth that sounds like desperate fabrication even to my own ears. Sterling's smile widens because he understands that believability matters more than accuracy in court of public opinion trials. Convenient timing. Did Victoria happen to mention this revelation during pillow talk? Or did you stumble across adoption records while going through her personal effects? Rage surges hot and violent through my chest, but I force it down through years of practice, controlling emotions that could get a mechanic fired or a single father reported to child services. Sterling wants me to lose control, wants me to throw punches that will justify immediate termination and validate every accusation he's leveled. I won't give him the satisfaction. This meeting is over. You've made your accusations, Sterling, and now the board can decide how to proceed through proper channels rather than ambush theatrics. I stand and walk toward the door, aware that every eye tracks my movement like predators assessing wounded prey. Montgomery follows his briefcase clutched tight enough that knuckles show white against expensive leather. Ashford, we need to prepare a statement before the press gets Sterling's version of events. If you have documentation proving your timeline. There is no documentation. Just Victoria's letter explaining everything which is now in Sterling's possession and about to become public knowledge. I grab my phone from my pocket and dial Rowan's number, praying she's still in class and hasn't checked social media, where this will spread like wildfire through the incestuous networks of tech industry gossip. She answers on the 4th ring, breathless from running between buildings. Dad, is everything okay? Where are you right now, biology lab? Why you sound weird? I need you to leave school immediately and come straight home. Don't talk to anyone, don't check your phone, just get in your car and drive. Dad, you're scaring me. What happened? Please, Rowan, trust me. I'll explain everything when you get home, but you need to leave right now. She agrees with the kind of worried compliance that twists guilt deeper into my sternum. I'm manufacturing the exact scenario I'd spent 3 months trying to prevent dumping life-altering information on my daughter without preparation or context, forcing her to process trauma while emotionally raw and intellectually unprepared. But Sterling has stolen the luxury of careful timing. In approximately 90 minutes, major outlets will publish stories about Victoria Hayes' secret child and the conspiracy theories surrounding my promotion. Rowan will learn her biological mother's identity through sensationalized headlines designed for maximum click-through rates rather than human compassion. Montgomery intercepts me at the elevator bank with his phone pressed against his ear and panic fracturing his professional composure. The story just went live on TechCrunch. They're calling it the biggest corporate scandal since Theranos. His screen displays the headline in bold sans serif font. Late tech CEO Victoria Hayes had secret daughter, promoted girl's father to top position. Below it, a photograph of Victoria from last year's shareholders meeting paired with my official Hayes Industries headshot, creates visual narrative of impropriety that requires no additional context. The article contains enough accurate details mixed with speculative fiction that libel lawsuits would be futile. Yes, Victoria gave up a child for adoption 18 years ago. Yes, I adopted Rowan through the same agency. Yes, Victoria promoted me rapidly and appointed me CEO in her will. But the insinuations about affairs and manipulation and deliberate deception ignore the timeline that proves that Victoria only discovered the connection 2 weeks before her death. Not that truth matters when scandal sells advertising and generates social media engagement. My phone explodes with notifications, texts from colleagues expressing shock, emails from reporters demanding comment, voicemails from board members covering their political exposure. I silence everything and drive toward home with hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough to hurt mind, racing through a dozen different approaches to the conversation, waiting in my living room. How do you tell your daughter that her mother, the woman who gave her life and then gave her away, has been dead for 3 months and you've known the whole time? How do you explain that the CEO she'd admired was searching desperately for reconciliation that arrived 2 weeks too late? How do you ask forgiveness for choosing comfortable lies over painful truth when the lies were motivated by love and the truth would have shattered her during vulnerable months? There are no good answers, only varying degrees of inadequacy. Rowan's car sits in the driveway when I arrive, engine still ticking with residual heat. She's inside pacing the living room with her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands and her face streaked with tears that tell me everything I need to know. Someone reached her first, a classmate, a news alert, some concerned friend forwarding links with emoji reactions suggesting this was juicy gossip rather than my daughter's world collapsing in real time. She rounds on me the instant I walk through the door, holding her phone like a weapon or shield. Tell me it's not true. Tell me the news is lying and Victoria wasn't my mother. The anguish in her voice demolishes the careful explanations I'd rehearsed during the drive home. All my planned approaches, gentle revelation, contextual framework, emphasis on Victoria's love rather than her absence, evaporate in the face of Rowan's raw devastation. It's true, Victoria was your biological mother. I only found out after she died. Rowan's legs buckle and she collapses onto the couch, phone clattering to hardwood floors. You knew for 3 months you knew and didn't tell me. I was trying to protect you during a difficult time. You had SATs and college applications and protect me. She screams the words with fury that echoes off walls and shatters something fundamental between us. You let me grieve a mentor when I should have been grieving my mother. You let me talk about her in past tense like she was just some nice lady who gave me career advice instead of the woman who gave birth to me. The accusations land with precision, born from months of unknowing betrayal. Rowan's right, I'd sat through dinners listening to her share fond memories of Victoria while hiding the truth that would have transformed those memories into something infinitely more significant and painful. Victoria wanted to tell you herself. She was planning to that weekend, but she died before, but she didn't. Rowan lurches to her feet and begins pacing again. Manic energy that needs outlet before it tears her apart from inside. She waited too long, and now she's dead, and I'll never get to ask her why. Why she gave me away, why she searched for me, why she didn't just tell me the truth when she had the chance. She was terrified you'd hate her. Terrified I'd say no to letting her be part of your life. She'd spent 18 years building a legacy worthy of you and was scared of rejection from the daughter she'd never stopped loving. The explanation sounds hollow even as I speak it, inadequate justification for decisions that cost us all the chance at something meaningful. Rowan stares at me with betrayal written across features that suddenly impossibly look exactly like Victoria's when grief cracked through her CEO armor. Did you love her? The question cuts deeper than accusations of deception. I'd been falling for Victoria Hayes before I learned she was Rowan's mother, drawn to the woman who saw past my lack of credentials to the competence beneath. The connection had grown slowly across stolen lunches and late-night emails, professional boundaries eroding into something neither of us could quite name, but both desperately wanted. Yes, I loved her, and she felt the same way, which is why she asked me that Friday if there was room in my life for her to be part of yours. Rowan absorbs this with visible effort, processing revelations, stacking faster than comprehension can organize them into coherent narrative. So you were going to date my mother, the mother I didn't know was my mother. She wanted to be your friend first, earn the right to eventually tell you the truth if you both felt comfortable. Victoria never intended to disrupt our family or take you away from me, but now she's gone and I'll never know what that could have been. Rowan's voice breaks on the final word, fury collapsing into grief so profound it threatens to drown us both. She was right there, Dad. I served her coffee every single morning. We talked about my dreams and she gave me advice. And all along, she was my mother watching her own daughter without being able to claim me. The image of Victoria at that coffee shop, desperate longing, maintaining professional distance, while her heart shattered with proximity to the child she'd lost, makes my own eyes burn with tears I've been suppressing for months. I'd been so focused on protecting Rowan from painful knowledge that I'd never fully confronted my own grief at losing the woman I'd barely begun to love and would never get the chance to choose. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I was making the right choice, but I see now that I was wrong. Rowan looks at me with exhaustion, aging her beyond 18 years. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Dad. Maybe eventually, but not now. Right now, I need you to leave me alone. She flees to her bedroom before I can respond, door slamming with finality that reverberates through the empty house. I stand in the living room surrounded by the wreckage of trust carefully built over 10 years and destroyed in one catastrophic afternoon, wondering if there's any path forward that doesn't involve permanent damage to the only family either of us has left. My phone rings with Evelyn Hayes' number flashing across the screen. I'd called her from the car, desperate for guidance from someone who'd known Victoria and might help navigate the impossible conversation I just spectacularly failed. I'm at SFO waiting for a rental car. I'll be there in an hour. Her voice carries Victoria's authoritative certainty stripped of softness. Softness, all business and forward momentum. Rowan needs family right now, and while you're doing your best, Garrett, you're not equipped to help her process this alone. She's locked herself in her room and won't talk to me. Then I'll talk to her. I'm her aunt, and I've been where she is losing Victoria not once but twice to decisions made by people who thought they knew what was best. The observation stings with accuracy. Victoria's parents had forced impossible choices on their pregnant daughter, and I'd repeated the pattern by deciding unilaterally what Rowan could handle rather than giving her agency over her own emotional journey. The parallel shames me more than Sterling's accusations or the board's condemnation. Evelyn arrives 90 minutes later carrying an overnight bag and the kind of determined energy that suggests she's prepared for extended siege warfare. She knocks on Rowan's door with authority that brooks no refusal. Rowan, it's Evelyn Hayes, Victoria's sister. I know you're hurting, but I flew here specifically to talk with you about your mother. You can tell me to leave, but I'm asking for 10 minutes first. Silence stretches long enough that I think Rowan will refuse, but eventually the lock clicks and the door opens a crack. Evelyn slips inside before Rowan can reconsider, and I'm left standing in the hallway listening to muffled voices that gradually become distinguishable through thin walls. Victoria called me the night before she died. She was terrified and excited and more vulnerable than I'd heard her in years. She told me she'd found you, that she was going to saw you and your father that weekend, that she was finally going to have the chance to know the daughter she'd spent 18 years missing. Why did she give me away? Evelyn's response comes slower, weighted with history and context. Your grandparents, Victoria's parents, gave her an ultimatum when she got pregnant. They were wealthy and obsessed with reputation, couldn't stand the scandal of an unwed teenage mother in their social circle. They told Victoria she could keep the baby and lose her family and any financial support, or she could give you up for adoption and maintain her inheritance. That's horrible. It destroyed her. I was in graduate school when it happened, helpless to do anything except watch my little sister make an impossible choice. She held you for 2 hours after birth, named you Lily in her heart, and then signed papers that broke something fundamental inside her. Rowan's voice emerges thick with tears. Did she ever try to find me before 3 years ago? She wanted to, but she had nothing. No money, no resources, no legal standing since she'd terminated her parental rights. So Victoria spent 15 years building Hayes Industries specifically to create the kind of wealth and power that would let her search properly when she was ready. Every success was for you, Rowan. Every late night, every risk, every sacrifice she made was because she hoped to find you again someday. The revelation settles into silence while Rowan processes the scope of Victoria's determination. My own understanding shifts too. reframing the CEO's legendary drive as something more poignant than simple ambition. She'd built an empire to reclaim her daughter, measured success not in revenue or market share, but in proximity to resources that might bridge 18 years of enforced separation. I wish I'd known her. You did know her, Rowan. Maybe not as your mother, but as a woman who cared deeply about your future and wanted to help you succeed. Those conversations at the coffee shop weren't fake or manipulative. They were Victoria trying to be part of your life in the only way circumstances allowed. It's not enough, Rowan's voice cracks with renewed grief. I want more than coffee shop conversations and career advice. I want to ask her about my medical history and whether I looked like her when she was my age, and if she ever regretted giving me away, even though she did it out of love. Evelyn's response comes gentle but firm. There's a video. Victoria made it a year ago as insurance in case she died before finding you. Your father has it, and while I can't make him show you before he thinks you're ready, I can tell you it exists and that she says many of the things you need to hear. Footsteps approach the door, and Rowan emerges with red-rimmed eyes and a determination that mirrors Victoria's signature expression when facing impossible obstacles. Where's the video, Dad? I retrieve the laptop from my desk drawer, hands shaking as I open the file Montgomery had transferred onto a secure drive. The thumbnail shows Victoria in her home office, looking younger and healthier, eyes bright with tears she was fighting to contain. I plug the laptop into our TV and step back, giving Rowan space to confront the mother she'd lost before ever knowing she'd been found. The video begins with Victoria taking a steadying breath, her professional composure visibly crumbling in the privacy of recording for an audience of one unknown daughter. Hi, sweetheart. If you're watching this, it means I found you, but didn't get the chance to tell you myself. My name is Victoria Hayes, and I'm your birth mother. Rowan makes a sound somewhere between awe and gasp, reaching toward the screen like she might touch Victoria's face if she extends far enough. Evelyn settles beside her on the couch while I stand near the doorway, trapped between wanting to witness this and feeling like an intruder on something sacred between mother and daughter. I don't know how old you are now or what your life is like, but I hope you're happy. I hope you're loved. That's all I ever wanted for you. Victoria's voice carries the weight of 18 years longing compressed into a 5-minute message. She explains the circumstances of Rowan's birth and adoption with unflinching honesty, taking responsibility for choices made by a terrified 19-year-old with no support system and fewer options. She describes the 2 hours she'd held her newborn daughter, memorizing features and whispering promises about returning someday when she was capable of providing the life an innocent child deserved. I named you Lily in my heart before they took you away. I whispered it to you so you'd know even if your parents chose something different. Lily, your name is Lily. Rowan's entire body goes rigid. That's my middle name. The Thompsons named me Rowan Lily because the nurse at St. Catherine's told them my birth mother had requested they consider Lily. Evelyn and I exchanged glances loaded with cosmic coincidences implications. The nurse had kept her promise, had honored Victoria's final request before severing parental rights, and somehow the name had survived adoption to become the middle name Rowan had always carried without knowing its origin. Victoria continues through tears she'd stopped trying to hide, explaining how she'd built Hayes Industries with the specific goal of funding a search when she was emotionally and financially ready. She describes the 3 years of investigation, the dead ends and false leads, the private investigator who'd finally connected the dots from St. Catherine's to the Thompsons to Garrett Ashford. Every year on March 15th, your birthday, I light a candle and make a wish that you're safe, that you're happy, that one day I'll find you and get to tell you in person how sorry I am, how much I love you, how proud I am of whoever you've become. The video timestamp shows Victoria had recorded this exactly 1 year before her death, creating insurance against the heart condition she'd known might kill her before completing the search. She'd prioritized finding Rowan over seeking treatment that might have extended her life, gambling everything on a reunion that arrived 2 weeks too late. If you're angry at me, I understand. If you hate me, I don't blame you. But please know this, I have loved you every single day of your life. Not a day passed that I didn't think of you. Wonder about you, miss you, with an ache that never quite healed. Rowan dissolves completely, curling into Evelyn's arms and sobbing with abandon that suggests months of accumulated grief finally finding release. I move closer but stop when she shakes her head, rejecting comfort from the father who'd hidden this truth even as I'd claimed to protect her from it. Victoria's final words fill the living room with her presence ghost of the woman I'd loved speaking directly to the daughter she died trying to reclaim. I hope your father is kind. I hope your mother is patient. I hope they love you the way I couldn't when you needed me most. But if the universe is generous enough to let me find you before I die, I promise I'll tell you all of this in person. I'll ask for forgiveness I don't deserve and offer you a relationship you're free to refuse. Most importantly, I'll make sure you know you were wanted, you were loved, you were my first thought every morning and my last thought every night. The screen fades to black as Victoria's recorded voice whispers a final declaration. I love you, Lily. I always will. Your mother, Victoria. Rowan sits frozen in the aftermath, staring at the blank screen like it might resurrect the woman who'd poured her heart into pixels and sound waves. When she finally speaks, her voice emerges small and broken. She knew she might die before finding me. That's why she made this video a year ago, instead of waiting until after the search succeeded. Evelyn nods confirmation. Victoria's mother, your grandmother, died of sudden heart failure at 40. Victoria knew she'd inherited the condition but refused treatment because she wanted to use every remaining day searching rather than extending a life that felt incomplete without you in it. The revelation lands with crushing weight. Victoria had chosen her daughter over her own survival, had knowingly sacrificed years she might have had in favor of weeks she could spend searching. The decision speaks to love so fierce it consumed everything else, including basic self-preservation instinct. My grandmother. Rowan tests the word like foreign language. I have grandparents. You did. Victoria's parents gave her that ultimatum about keeping you, then cut her off completely when she refused to pretend the pregnancy never happened. They didn't reconcile before she died, so they don't even know I exist. Actually, Evelyn's expression shifts into something complicated. They do now. The news coverage mentioned Victoria's secret daughter, and I received a call from my mother this afternoon. Your grandparents want to meet you. Rowan looks at me for the first time since the video ended, seeking guidance I'm unqualified to provide. What do you think, Dad? The question carries weight beyond its simple words. An olive branch extended across the chasm. My deception created a chance to rebuild trust through honesty, instead of repeating patterns that destroyed it initially. I think Victoria would want you to have all the family you can get, even family that failed her when she needed them most. But it's your choice, Rowan. You get to decide who deserves space in your life. She considers this with visible effort, processing revelations layered atop revelations, while grief and anger and confusion war for dominance in her exhausted mind. I need time before I can handle meeting strangers who claim to be grandparents. Right now, I need to process that my mother died searching for me, and I'll never get the chance to know her as anything except a video recording. That's completely reasonable. Evelyn's voice carries professional therapist cadence despite her lack of formal credentials. There's no timeline on healing from this kind of loss. Take whatever time you need. The doorbell interrupts before Rowan can respond, followed immediately by aggressive knocking that suggests reporters have tracked us down for comment on the day's scandal. I move toward the door, but Evelyn beats me there, opening it to reveal Elliot Montgomery with his briefcase and an expression suggesting more bad news incoming. We have a situation. The board called an emergency shareholders meeting for tomorrow morning. Sterling is moving to void Victoria's entire will on grounds of undue influence and mental incompetence, claiming she was emotionally compromised when she made decisions about succession and Rowan's inheritance. What inheritance? Rowan's question reminds me she knows nothing about the full scope of Victoria's will beyond my CEO appointment. Montgomery glances at her, then at me, seeking permission to continue. Go ahead, no more secrets. He opens his briefcase and extracts documents I recognize from our initial meeting. Ms. Hayes established a trust fund containing $10 million for Rowan's benefit, accessible when she turns 25. Additionally, she structured her will so that Rowan will inherit 51% controlling interest in Hayes Industries at the same age, making her the majority shareholder and effective owner of the company. Rowan's face drains of color. $10 million, 51% of a company worth hundreds of millions. Victoria wanted to ensure your future was secure and that you'd have the resources to pursue whatever dreams you chose without financial constraints. She also wanted you to have the power to protect what she'd built from people like Sterling, who prioritize profits over principles. I don't want her money. Rowan's voice emerges fierce and certain. I don't want the company or the trust fund or any of it. I want her, and since I can't have that, I don't want constant reminders of what I lost before I even knew it existed. The rejection comes from raw grief rather than considered decision, but Montgomery treats it with gravity it deserves. You don't have to make any choices about the inheritance right now. The trust doesn't become accessible for 7 years regardless. But tomorrow's meeting will determine whether you'll have that option in the future or whether Sterling successfully dismantles everything Victoria built to provide for you. What happens if he wins? Then Victoria's will gets voided, her assets get distributed according to state law, and Hayes Industries falls under leadership that cares more about quarterly earnings than the values she spent her life defending. Your father loses his position, the company's culture changes dramatically, and Victoria's legacy becomes a cautionary tale about letting emotions influence business decisions. The stakes crystallize into clarity. This isn't just about my career or Rowan's inheritance. It's about whether Victoria's final wishes matter enough to fight for against people who'd use her death as opportunity for corporate coup. Sterling Blackwood and his allies want to erase her influence to reshape Hayes Industries into something she'd spent decades preventing it from becoming. I'll be there tomorrow. My voice carries conviction I'd been lacking since Sterling dropped his bomb in the conference room. Whatever it takes to honor Victoria's intentions, I'll do it. Rowan stands abruptly, exhaustion and determination warring across features too young to carry this much weight. I'm coming too. If they're going to debate my mother's mental competence and whether I deserve what she left me, I have the right to be there. Montgomery starts to object but catches himself. Actually, your presence might help. It's harder to dehumanize Victoria's decisions when the daughter she was providing for sits in the room as living proof of her love. The meeting adjourns with plans to reconvene at Hayes Industries headquarters at 9 the following morning. Evelyn offers to stay the night, but Rowan declines with exhausted politeness that suggests she needs space to process privately. I walk Montgomery and Evelyn to their cars, accepting the former's legal briefing and the latter's emotional support with equal gratitude. She'll forgive you eventually. Evelyn's hand squeezes my shoulder with surprising strength. Victoria made the same mistake you did trying to control the timing of truth to minimize pain, instead of trusting the people you love to handle difficult information. She died before she could fix it, but you still have time. The observation offers small comfort, but enough to keep me from drowning in self-recrimination. I return inside to find Rowan standing at the mantel, examining framed photographs of our family, her adoptive parents who died too young me at her 8th grade graduation, candid shots from holidays and birthdays that document the life we'd built from tragedy. She picks up the photo from Victoria's company picnic, the one she'd been clutching at the funeral, and studies it with new understanding. I look like her. I never noticed before because I wasn't looking for similarities, but now I can see it. Same eyes, same chin, same expression when we're trying not to cry. You have her determination too, and her inability to settle for anything less than what you deserve. Rowan sets the photo down, gently handling it like the precious artifact it's become. I'm still angry at you for hiding this, but I understand why you did it, even if I think you were wrong. Sometimes the people who love us make terrible choices because they're scared of losing us. The forgiveness comes conditional and partial, but more than I deserve after months of deception. We stand together in awkward silence that gradually eases into something bearable. Two people learning how to exist in the wreckage of revelations neither of us wanted, but both must navigate regardless. Tomorrow I'm going to stand in front of a room full of executives and defend my mother's decisions. Tonight I need to sleep if I can. She disappears into her bedroom without waiting for response, leaving me alone with guilt and grief and determination to ensure Sterling Blackwood doesn't steal Victoria's legacy the way death stole her chance at redemption. The shareholders meeting convenes at 9 sharp in Hayes Industries' largest conference room, designed to accommodate 50 people, but currently packed with twice that number. Reporters line the back wall despite Montgomery's attempts to limit attendance to voting members and legal representatives, their cameras, and recording devices, transforming corporate governance into public spectacle. Sterling has orchestrated this, perfectly ensuring maximum exposure for whatever damage he plans to inflict. Rowan sits beside me in the front row, spine rigid with determination that masks the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. She'd barely slept, spent most of the night reading Victoria's letter and watching the video on repeat, processing 18 years of maternal absence compressed into 5 minutes of recorded confession. Now she faces a room full of strangers debating whether her mother was competent or manipulated, whether love constituted undue influence, whether grief-motivated decisions deserved respect or required correction. Sterling approaches the podium with folders thick enough to suggest extensive documentation, or at least the appearance of it. His opening statement attacks Victoria's judgment with surgical precision, cataloging every decision she'd made in her final weeks and framing them as evidence of emotional compromise rather than deliberate choice. Victoria Hayes was brilliant, driven, and deeply troubled by her past. That combination made her vulnerable to exploitation by people who understood her weaknesses and leveraged them for personal gain. Garrett Ashford identified his daughter's biological connection to our CEO and used that knowledge to secure promotions, financial benefits, and ultimately control of a company he's unqualified to lead. The accusations ignore timeline and logic, but they resonate with shareholders who'd rather believe in conspiracy than accept that Victoria might have valued character over credentials. Montgomery rises to object, citing the letter's explicit explanation that Victoria only discovered the connection 2 weeks before her death, but Sterling talks over him with prepared rebuttals. Convenient that the only evidence of timing comes from a private letter written by a woman with documented heart problems that might have affected her cognitive function in her final days. We have no way to verify when Victoria actually learned about this connection or whether Ashford himself told her as part of a long-term manipulation strategy. That's a lie. Rowan's voice cuts through Sterling's monologue with the kind of steel-backed certainty Victoria had wielded in boardroom battles. Every head swivels toward my daughter as she stands trembling slightly, but refusing to back down under scrutiny from 50 pairs of eyes. My mother, Victoria, didn't know who I was until 2 weeks before she died. I know because I have journals she kept from the past year. Journals where she writes about the coffee shop girl she'd gotten to know and wished was her daughter, never suspecting her wish had already come true. She discovered the truth through an investigator's report dated exactly 14 days before her heart gave out, and she spent those final days planning how to tell me and my father without destroying the life we'd built. Sterling's expression shifts from smug confidence to irritation at unexpected resistance. Young lady, you're understandably emotional about your mother's death, but this meeting requires objective analysis rather than sentiment. What it requires is honesty. Rowan's voice strengthens as she finds her footing. You're claiming Victoria was mentally incompetent because she promoted a talented employee who happened to be raising her biological child. But that logic only works if you ignore everything she accomplished in her final months, the contracts she negotiated, the strategic pivots she executed, the board meetings where she demonstrated the same sharp thinking that built this company from nothing. My father didn't manipulate her. She chose him because she trusted his integrity more than she trusted people like you who measure worth in degrees rather than results. The room erupts in overlapping arguments and defensive posturing. Several board members who'd been leaning towards Sterling's opposition reconsider, visibly swayed by Rowan's passionate defense and the journals she'd mentioned as evidence. Montgomery seizes the momentum shift to introduce Victoria's medical records, proving her heart condition existed for years without affecting cognitive function, that her final decisions came from a mind as sharp as ever, even as her body betrayed her. But Sterling has deeper ammunition than I'd anticipated. He produces his own documents, these ones dating back 15 years to Hayes Industries' early days, when Victoria was still scrambling for funding and legitimacy. Since we're discussing Victoria Hayes' judgment and ethics, let's examine her track record more closely. In 2010, Ms. Hayes illegally used company equipment as collateral for a personal loan of $50,000. She falsified asset reports, misrepresented ownership, and committed fraud that would have landed anyone else in prison. The statute of limitations has expired, but the pattern of deception speaks to character. The revelation detonates with force I hadn't prepared for, despite knowing Victoria's past contained compromises made from desperation. Shareholders gasp and whisper their previous sympathy, eroding under the weight of criminal behavior, however ancient. Rowan pales beside me, blindsided by the grandmother she'd been mourning transforming into someone who'd broken laws most people considered inviolable. Montgomery attempts damage control, but Sterling steamrolls through objections, presenting bank statements and loan documents that prove every accusation. Victoria had committed fraud, had risked everything in ways that violated both legal and ethical boundaries. And what did she use that illegally obtained money for? Sterling's triumph radiates from every syllable. She paid private investigators to search for the child she'd given up for adoption. She prioritized finding her daughter over following the law, over protecting this company's integrity, over basic honesty. That's the woman you're defending, and the woman whose judgment you claim was sound, despite documented evidence of criminal activity motivated by emotional obsession. The attack lands devastatingly because it's partially true. Victoria had broken rules, had committed fraud in service of her search, had chosen maternal instinct over legal compliance. But Sterling's framing strips context from decisions, ignores the difference between crimes motivated by greed versus desperate love. I stand before fully processing the decision, moving on instinct rather than calculation. You're right that Victoria broke the law 15 years ago. She used company assets improperly and falsified records to secure funding for something that mattered more to her than legal compliance. But what Sterling conveniently omits is that she spent the next decade making restitution, that every penny of that loan plus interest got repaid, that she implemented compliance systems, ensuring Hayes Industries never again operated in gray areas regardless of motivation. Sterling's smile suggests he'd hoped for exactly this response. So you admit she was a criminal, that this company was founded on fraud. I admit she was human, that she made mistakes out of love rather than greed, and spent years fixing those mistakes because she believed in taking responsibility for harm caused even when legal consequences had expired. Victoria Hayes built this company on hard work and brilliant strategy, not deception. The fraud was an aberration during desperate times, not a pattern defining her character. The defense sounds weak even to my own ears, insufficient justification for behavior that violates fundamental business ethics. But Rowan stands beside me, again, her hand finding mine in solidarity that transcends the anger she directed at me yesterday. My mother wasn't perfect. She made choices I wish she hadn't, broke rules I'd prefer she'd kept. But she spent her entire adult life trying to be worthy of the daughter she'd given away, building something that might justify the pain she'd caused. You can judge her for 15-year-old mistakes, or you can recognize that people are more than their worst decisions, that love doesn't excuse wrongdoing, but it does explain it. The room settles into uneasy silence while board members calculate political positions and shareholders weigh profit against principle. Montgomery uses the pause to introduce Victoria's full financial records, demonstrating how she'd corrected the initial fraud and operated with scrupulous honesty for the subsequent 14 years. The pattern supports our argument that youthful desperation differs from ongoing deception, but skepticism remains thick in the air. A vote is called on Sterling's motion to void Victoria's will. The tally comes back 7 in favor, 8 against, with the deciding vote cast by a board member who'd known Victoria since the company's founding and refused to let ancient mistakes erase decades of integrity. Sterling storms from the room promising litigation and media campaigns, but Montgomery assures us the legal foundation holds firm enough to withstand challenge. Rowan collapses into her chair once the crowd disperses, adrenaline draining and leaving her shaking with delayed reaction. I didn't know she'd committed fraud, that she'd broken laws searching for me. She was 19, alone and desperate to find the daughter she'd been forced to give up. It doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains why someone otherwise ethical might cross lines she'd normally respect. Rowan processes this addition to Victoria's complicated legacy, integrating criminal behavior into the mental image of a mother who'd loved fiercely enough to risk everything. The cognitive dissonance shows in her expression, wanting to defend Victoria while grappling with disappointment that even maternal love hadn't prevented serious wrongdoing. What do we do now? We be honest. We acknowledge Victoria's mistakes publicly while defending her intentions, and we let the chips fall where they will. The press conference happens that afternoon in the same building where shareholders had debated Victoria's competence hours earlier. Reporters pack the room with questions loaded and ready, cameras tracking my approach to the podium like predators anticipating weakness. I'd prepared remarks with Montgomery's help, careful legal language designed to minimize liability while maximizing sympathy. But standing under those lights with Rowan watching from the front row, I abandoned the script in favor of truth. Victoria Hayes made mistakes 15 years ago while searching for the daughter she'd given up for adoption. She used improper methods to secure funding for private investigators, committed fraud that violated both legal and ethical standards, and prioritized personal goals over corporate integrity during Hayes Industries' vulnerable early years. Those actions were wrong regardless of motivation, and I won't pretend otherwise to protect her legacy. The reporters lean forward, sensing blood in the water, but I continue before they can pounce with follow-up questions. Victoria spent the next decade making restitution for those mistakes. She repaid every dollar with interest-implemented compliance systems that prevented similar lapses and built Hayes Industries into a company known for ethical business practices and social responsibility. She was human, flawed, desperate, driven by love that sometimes overwhelmed her judgment. But she was also determined to be better, to create something worthy of the daughter she hoped to find again. A reporter near the front raises her hand without waiting for recognition. Are you asking us to excuse criminal behavior because it was motivated by maternal instinct? I'm asking you to recognize that people contain multitudes, that someone can make terrible choices and still deserve more than reduction to their worst moments. Victoria Hayes was neither saint nor criminal, but something more complicated, a woman who built an empire partially to atone for decisions she regretted and partially to provide for a child who didn't know she existed. Judge her for the fraud, if you must, but judge the full person rather than convenient caricature. The honesty shifts something in the room's energy. Several reporters nod thoughtfully, while others type furiously, crafting narratives that will range from sympathetic to scathing, depending on their editorial positions. I field questions for another 30 minutes, refusing to hide behind corporate speak or minimize Victoria's wrongdoing, while insisting her life amounted to more than 15-year-old mistakes. The public reaction arrives mixed but trending positive. Parents of adopted children flood social media with support, arguing that anyone who'd lost a child might understand desperate measures taken in service of reunion. Ethics professors debate whether love mitigates legal violations or whether standards apply regardless of motivation. Business analysts question my leadership competence, but grudgingly acknowledge the honesty strategy prevented worse scandal. Hayes Industries stock drops 12% before stabilizing, then gradually recovers as the news cycle moves toward fresh outrage. The board remains fractured, but functional Sterling's attempted coup having failed decisively enough that he disappears into consulting positions with competitors who'd rather exploit his bitterness than Hayes Industries' expertise. 6 months pass in relative stability. Rowan throws herself into senior year with manic focus, using academics as escape from grief that ambushes her in unexpected moments. Stanford accepts her early decision application with a full scholarship funded by the Victoria Hayes Memorial Program I'd established using company resources earmarked for educational initiatives. She cries reading the acceptance letter, overwhelmed by pride and loss and the bittersweet recognition that her mother's dream had come true, even though Victoria would never witness it. Evelyn becomes a constant presence, flying down from Seattle monthly to spend weekends helping Rowan process the complicated legacy she'd inherited. They sort through Victoria's personal effects together, discovering journals dating back years that document her search and her observations about the coffee shop daughter who'd captured her attention months before the investigator confirmed biological connection. One entry stops Rowan mid-page, her finger trembling against ink that had dried while Victoria's heart still beat. I saw Lily. I have to stop calling her that when I don't know her actual name at the coffee shop again today. She was studying for calculus finals, and I wanted so badly to help, to tell her I'd aced those same courses 20 years ago and could explain the concepts she was struggling with. Instead, I ordered my Americano and watched from across the room, memorizing the way she chews her pen when concentrating, the little victory dance she does when equations finally make sense. She's brilliant and determined, and everything I'd hoped she might become. I wonder if she'd hate me if she knew who I was. Rowan reads the passage aloud through tears, then continues flipping pages that document Victoria's internal war between desperate longing and terrified paralysis. Every entry reinforces how much her mother had loved from afar, how thoroughly she'd known the daughter she couldn't claim, without permission I'd never granted, because I'd been ignorant of the question. A letter arrives in February from Phoenix, Arizona, postmarked with return address bearing the name Hayes but not Evelyn's. Rowan opens it carefully, extracting expensive stationery covered in elegant script. Dear Rowan, we are Nathaniel and Constance Hayes, Victoria's parents, and your biological grandparents. We learned of your existence through the news coverage surrounding your mother's death, and we have spent the intervening months in profound regret for decisions made 18 years ago. We gave Victoria an ultimatum that forced impossible choices, then compounded that cruelty by cutting her from our lives when she refused to pretend her pregnancy had never happened. We cannot undo the past or reclaim time lost with our daughter, but we would very much like the opportunity to meet you if you are willing. We understand you may harbor justifiable anger toward us, and we will respect whatever boundaries you choose to set. With sincere hope for reconciliation, Nathaniel and Constance. Rowan stares at the letter for 10 minutes before handing it to me wordlessly. The grandparents who destroyed Victoria's support system now want access to the granddaughter their cruelty had kept hidden for nearly 2 decades. The audacity should be infuriating, but instead I feel only exhaustion at the cascading consequences of fear-motivated decisions rippling through generations. What do you think? My opinion carries less weight than it should after months of proved fallibility. But Rowan asks anyway and deserves honest response. I think Victoria would want you to have all the family available, even family that failed her catastrophically. But I also think you shouldn't feel obligated to forgive people just because they share your DNA. I want to meet them, not because I'm ready to forgive, but because I need to understand what kind of people could do that to their own daughter. And maybe because Victoria never got the chance to confront them as an adult, and I can do it in her place. We fly to Phoenix 2 weeks later. Rowan's 19th birthday, having passed quietly with cake and memories instead of celebration. Nathaniel and Constance live in an upscale retirement community where buildings sprawl across manicured lawns and wealth insulates residents from harsher realities beyond security gates. They greet us at their door with the kind of nervous formality that suggests rehearsed speeches in uncertain reception. Constance breaks firsthand, flying to her mouth as tears spill unchecked down aged cheeks. You look exactly like Victoria at your age. Same eyes, same determined expression, same way of standing like you're ready to fight the world if necessary. Rowan absorbs the observation without warmth, maintaining polite distance while evaluating these strangers who'd caused such profound damage. Nathaniel gestures toward their living room, where photographs line every surface, Victoria as a child, as a teenager conspicuously absent during her early 20s, before reappearing in professional contexts that maintain careful emotional distance. We made a terrible mistake giving Victoria that ultimatum. Nathaniel's voice carries the weight of years spent contemplating irreversible harm. We thought we were protecting our family's reputation, preserving social standing that mattered more to us then than our daughter's happiness. By the time we realized our error, Victoria had cut us off completely. She returned every letter unopened, refused every phone call, built her entire empire specifically to prove she didn't need the family that had abandoned her. So you knew about Hayes Industries, but never tried to reconcile Constance, twist her hands with visible distress. We attended her public appearances, read every article about her success, felt proud and ashamed in equal measure. Victoria had accomplished everything she'd set out to prove, that she was brilliant enough, strong enough, successful enough to thrive without our support. How could we intrude on that triumph with apologies that wouldn't undo the damage? Rowan's composure cracks, slightly anger bleeding through studied neutrality. You could have tried. You could have shown up at her office, sent flowers, done literally anything except stay silent while she spent 18 years searching for the daughter you'd forced her to give away. Maybe she would have rejected reconciliation, but at least you would have given her the choice instead of making decisions on her behalf like you did when she was 19. The accusation lands with deserved force. Nathaniel and Constance exchange glances loaded with guilt and recognition, seeing in Rowan the same fierce certainty Victoria had wielded when calling out hypocrisy and cowardice. You're absolutely right. We failed Victoria repeatedly when she needed us most, when she was building her company, when she was dying alone from a heart condition she'd inherited from Constance's side of the family. We have no excuse that justifies our silence, only explanation that fear makes cowards of people who should be brave. What do you want from me now? Constance's answer comes quiet but sincere. Nothing you're not willing to give. We don't expect forgiveness or relationship, only the chance to know the granddaughter we lost through our own failures. Victoria's legacy lives in you, Rowan, and being part of your life, however peripheral, would be an honor we don't deserve, but desperately hope for anyway. The vulnerability pierces Rowan's anger enough to create space for consideration. She doesn't agree to anything definitive, but accepts their phone number and promise to think about future contact. We leave Phoenix with more questions than answers, but also with the recognition that Victoria's parents carry genuine remorse, even if belated repentance can't resurrect opportunities squandered. 3 weeks later, a check for $5 million arrives with note from Nathaniel, explaining it's a donation to the Hayes Foundation I'd established using Victoria's estate funds. The foundation's mission focuses on reuniting adoptive families, providing resources for searches and legal support for navigating complex emotional terrain. The donation arrives with no strings attached, just an acknowledgement that money can't fix everything, but might help prevent other families from experiencing the same devastating separation. Rowan reads the note and makes a decision that surprises me. Call them. Tell Grandma and Grandpa that I'm willing to try monthly video calls. No promises beyond that, but I think Victoria would want me to give them the chance she never had. The foundation launches officially in April with a gala attended by 300 people who'd known Victoria or admired her work from distance. Rowan delivers a speech that brings half the room to tears, explaining how her mother had never gotten to meet her, but had ensured hundreds of other families wouldn't suffer the same permanent separation. Victoria Hayes spent 18 years missing someone she loved more than her own life. This foundation exists so that adoptive parents and biological families can find each other before time runs out, before hearts fail, or accidents happen, or opportunities disappear into permanent loss. My mother's legacy isn't the company she built or the money she earned. It's the proof that love transcends time when we're brave enough to act on it. The foundation reunites its first family within 2 months, then 5 more by summer's end. Stories flood in from across the country, birth mothers searching for children, adoptees seeking medical history, or closure, siblings separated by circumstance, finding each other through database matching and investigative support. Each reunion feels like honoring Victoria's memory more thoroughly than any corporate memorial or scholarship program. Rowan graduates valedictorian of her high school class, delivers a commencement speech about second chances and the courage required to forgive both others and ourselves for mistakes made from fear. She leaves for Stanford in August, diving into computer science with Victoria's determination and my practical problem-solving approach fused into something uniquely hers. 2 years pass faster than seems possible. Hayes Industries thrives under my leadership, despite initial skepticism about qualifications, revenue doubling through strategic pivots that prioritize innovation over quarterly profits. The board settles into uneasy acceptance, recognizing that Victoria's judgment had been sound, even if her methods sometimes crossed ethical lines. Rowan flourishes at Stanford, makes the dean's list, consistently joins the Hayes Foundation board of directors during summer break. She maintains monthly calls with Nathaniel and Constance, relationship slowly warming from obligation toward genuine affection as they share stories about Victoria's childhood and work together processing complex grief. Then Donovan Crane arrives with hostile intentions and resources to match. Crane built his fortune through aggressive acquisitions and asset stripping, the kind of vulture capitalism Victoria had spent her career opposing. He accumulates 25% of Hayes Industries stock through shell companies. In anonymous purchases, then reveals himself at a board meeting with an offer designed to tempt shareholders hungry for quick profits. $300 million, 50% premium over current market value. All you have to do is remove Garrett Ashford from leadership and install professional management that understands how to maximize returns. The board fractures predictably along established fault lines. Those who'd supported Victoria's vision resist, while those who'd always questioned her progressive policies see opportunity to reshape the company according to more traditional models. Crane presses his advantage by resurrecting the financial fraud story, adding new details dug up through investigative resources that make Victoria's crimes seem more extensive than initial reporting suggested. Hayes Industries was built on systematic deception. Victoria Hayes didn't just commit fraud once she structured her entire early operation around questionable practices and ethical shortcuts. The investigative report hits major outlets, simultaneously coordinated leak, suggesting Crane has been planning this assault for months. Documents surfaced showing Victoria had used creative accounting during her first 5 years, not quite illegal, but definitely operating in gray areas designed to inflate value and attract investors. The revelations don't technically constitute fraud, but they undermine the narrative of scrupulous ethics I'd been defending, suggesting pattern, rather than isolated mistake. The media firestorm reignites with renewed intensity. Stock prices plummet 15% in 2 days. Shareholders panic about exposure and liability. Board members who'd supported me waffle under pressure from investors demanding explanation or heads rolling to restore confidence. Montgomery recommends aggressive denial and litigation to suppress the leaked documents. But I've learned that honesty serves better than legal maneuvering when reputations hang in balance. I call another press conference, this time with Rowan beside me, in complete transparency about Victoria's complicated early history. Victoria Hayes was not a saint. She made questionable choices during Hayes Industries' founding years, choices that pushed ethical boundaries and sometimes crossed them. She used creative accounting that wasn't technically illegal, but definitely wasn't above-board employed tactics that prioritized growth over transparency and operated in gray areas because she believed the ends justified the means. The reporters sense confession and lean in hungrily. But I continue before they can frame this as validation of Crane's attacks. She was also building something from nothing while searching for the daughter she'd lost, making decisions under pressure most people never experience. That doesn't excuse the questionable practices, but it does provide context that pure judgment ignores. Victoria spent the next 15 years correcting those early mistakes, implementing systems that ensured Hayes Industries operated with integrity even when it hurt profitability. She learned from her errors instead of repeating them, chose principle over profit once she had the luxury of that choice. A reporter challenges from the back. So you admit the company was built on shaky ethical foundation? I admit Victoria was human, that she made choices. I wouldn't defend while building towards something I absolutely will defend. Hayes Industries today operates according to values she fought to instill after learning hard lessons about shortcuts and consequences. You can judge her for early missteps, or you can recognize that people capable of growth matter more than people who've never made mistakes because they've never risked anything. The honesty resonates differently than I'd expected. Social media explodes with support from employees and customers who appreciate transparency over spin, who'd rather work with companies acknowledging imperfection than claiming false moral superiority. Parents flood comment sections with stories about their own mistakes made from love and desperation, drawing parallels between Victoria's struggles and their own complicated lives. The narrative shifts from scandal toward redemption, from corporate malfeasance toward human complexity. Hayes Industries stock stabilizes, then rebounds as investors recognize that honesty about past problems signals confidence about present integrity. Crane's hostile takeover loses momentum as shareholders vote overwhelmingly to reject his offer, choosing values over immediate financial gain. He disappears back into whatever shadows spawn corporate raiders, but the victory feels Pyrrhic. We'd won by exposing Victoria's flaws to public scrutiny, by acknowledging her mistakes in ways that honor truth, while potentially tarnishing legacy. Rowan struggles with the revelation that her mother had been more ethically compromised than initial reports suggested, another layer of complexity added to grief already drowning her in contradictions. Did you know about the creative accounting before the leak? I suspected, based on industry patterns during that era. But I didn't have documentation proving it until Crane's investigators found what Victoria had buried. She wasn't who I thought she was. Rowan's voice carries disappointed resignation. Every time I think I understand her, something new appears that forces me to revise my mental image. She was exactly who you thought: brilliant, driven, flawed, and human. The specifics matter less than the pattern. Victoria made mistakes, learned from them, and spent her life trying to be worthy of the daughter she'd lost. That's who she was, Rowan, someone who failed and kept trying anyway. The observation seems to help, or at least provides framework for processing revelations that keep arriving in waves. Rowan returns to Stanford, determined to build something of her own, separate from Victoria's legacy, but informed by both her successes and failures. 4 years after Victoria's death, Rowan turns 21, surrounded by friends and family who've supported her through grief's marathon rather than sprint. She's thriving at Stanford, on track to graduate summa cum laude, with multiple job offers from companies impressed by her technical skills and leadership potential. But she surprises everyone by announcing different plans during her birthday celebration. I'm not waiting until 25 to make decisions about the inheritance. I'm restructuring it now while I can still choose freely rather than having circumstances force my hand. The board meets on her request, and Rowan presents a plan she'd developed with legal and financial advisors over preceding months. Instead of holding all 51% of controlling shares until age 25, she proposes splitting them immediately, 26% to me permanently, 25% to the Hayes Foundation as endowment, and she retains the controlling 51% voting power. This way, Dad can lead without worrying. I'll eventually replace him. The foundation gets financial independence to operate without relying on corporate donations, and I maintain enough influence to protect what Victoria built while pursuing my own path. The board approves unanimously, recognizing both the wisdom and the generosity. But Rowan isn't finished restructuring her future. I'm starting my own company. Lily Tech will develop AI tools specifically for adoption searches, making it easier for families to find each other without needing Victoria's wealth or my access to resources. I want to use the legacy she left me to help people like us, but I want to build it myself rather than inheriting something I didn't create. The announcement fills me with pride, complicated by recognition that she's separating from Hayes Industries, partially because Victoria's shadow looms too large there, making it impossible for Rowan to establish independent identity while working in her mother's company. Lily Tech launches 6 months later with seed funding from Rowan's trust and technical expertise, from classmates she recruits into believing the mission matters as much as the potential profits. The company grows slowly but steadily, developing algorithms that match adoption records with biological family searches, creating databases that respect privacy while facilitating connection. 5 years after Victoria's death, Hayes Industries dedicates its headquarters building in her memory. The naming ceremony draws hundreds of employees and community members who'd benefited from her leadership or philanthropy, speakers sharing stories about her fierce determination and unexpected kindness that coexisted with demanding standards. Rowan unveils a statue in the lobby, Victoria at 30, eyes fixed on distant horizons, with expression suggesting she could see possibilities others missed. The plaque reads simply, Victoria Hayes, 1988-2025, Mother Entrepreneur Dreamer. The foundation has reunited 500 families by this point, exponential growth, driven by increasing awareness and Rowan's technological innovations, making searches faster and more successful. Each reunion carries echoes of Victoria's unfulfilled hope, strangers embracing across years of separation because her death catalyzed systems preventing similar permanent loss. I stand beside my daughter during the ceremony, aware that we've become something neither Victoria nor I anticipated when she asked about bed sizes and eternal possibilities. Not romantic partners navigating complicated, blended family dynamics, but something perhaps more meaningful. Two people raising Victoria's daughter together, honoring her memory by creating the life she'd wanted for Rowan, even though she couldn't be present to witness it. Reporters ask about my relationship with Victoria during the post-ceremony reception, whether romance had truly existed, or whether scandal-obsessed media had manufactured connection from professional respect. I answer honestly for the first time in years of deflection. I loved her. Not for long enough to call it the great romance of my life, but deeply enough that her absence still aches during quiet moments. She was complicated and brilliant and wounded, and I wish we'd had more time to explore what might have grown between us if her heart had been stronger or my awareness quicker. The bed was always big enough, Victoria. I just wish you'd stayed long enough to see. 10 years after Victoria's death, Rowan has built Lily Tech into a $50 million company, employing 200 people dedicated to family reunification. She's married a software engineer who shares her passion for using technology to solve human problems, and they're expecting their first child in 3 months. I've retired from Hayes Industries' daily operations, though I remain chairman emeritus, spending my time running the foundation full-time and watching Rowan flourish in ways that would have made Victoria incandescent with pride. Nathaniel and Constance have become genuine grandparents, video calling weekly and flying out quarterly to maintain relationships they'd once destroyed through fear and prejudice. Rowan asked me to help her sort through Victoria's office furniture before the building renovation begins, one final sweep for anything personal that might have been overlooked in previous archiving. We're dismantling the massive desk when she discovers a hidden compartment behind the bottom drawer, spring-loaded mechanism that clicks open to reveal a sealed envelope. The handwriting addresses it in Victoria's precise script for my daughter on her wedding day. Rowan's hands shake as she breaks the seal with drawing pages that Victoria had written years before finding her creating message for future that might never arrive. She reads aloud through tears that blur ink but can't obscure meaning. My dearest Lily, Victoria had written using the name she'd given privately since official records showed something else. If you're reading this, it means I found you but didn't get to walk you down the aisle or stand beside whoever earned that honor. I'm sorry for missing your wedding and every other milestone I wasn't present for, but I hope you know I loved you through all of them, even from distance. The letter continues with advice about marriage and partnership, about choosing people who see you rather than projecting fantasies onto convenient shapes, about the courage required to build lives together when individual paths might seem easier. Victoria writes about her own failed relationships, the ways fear of vulnerability had kept her isolated, even as success brought material comfort but emotional poverty. I hope you marry for love instead of logic, for partnership that challenges you to become better versions of yourself rather than settling for comfortable mediocrity. I hope your spouse knows that family isn't about biology, but choice, that the people who choose us daily matter more than those whose connection comes from genetic accident. Rowan finishes reading with tears streaming freely, then looks at me with expressions suggesting she's finally integrated all the contradictory pieces of Victoria into coherent whole. She knew. Somehow she knew I'd name my daughter after her, that I'd want her present in spirit, if not body. The letter had mentioned future grandchildren, speculating about whether Rowan might honor Victoria by passing her name to the next generation if circumstances allowed. The prescience feels supernatural until I remember Victoria's strategic mind that planned for contingencies and prepared for futures she might not live to witness. What will you name her? Victoria Lily, after both the mother who found me and the name she gave me before I knew to answer to it. She'll carry the legacy forward, and maybe by the time she's grown, the story won't feel so sad anymore. Maybe it'll just be a story about love that transcended time and death, and all the mistakes humans make when they're too scared to be brave. We spend the afternoon at Victoria's grave, 3 generations connected by biology and choice in equal measure. Rowan's hand rests on her swollen belly while she speaks to the grandmother who'll never meet baby Victoria, telling her about Lily Tech and the families reunited and the life built from foundations of grief transformed into purpose. Thank you for loving me enough to let me go, and for loving me enough to never stop searching. Thank you for giving Dad the chance to raise me, and for trusting him with your company and your memory and the truth about who you were, flawed and brilliant and human, in mine. I add my own gratitude, quieter but no less sincere. Thank you for asking about my bed, Victoria. Thank you for seeing past my calluses to the person underneath, for trusting me with your daughter and your legacy and your complicated truth. The bed was always big enough for 2. We're just saving your spot for someone new. 10 years of grief and growth and hard-won wisdom compressed into this moment beside a grave marker that represents so much more than death's finality. Victoria Hayes lives in the company bearing her name, in the foundation reuniting families, in Rowan's fierce determination, in baby Victoria's future possibilities, in my own understanding that love doesn't require perfection, only presence, however we can manage it. The sun sets over the cemetery, painting headstones in gold light that makes mortality feel less like ending and more like transformation. We return home to prepare for tomorrow's foundation gala, for next month's baby shower, for all the ordinary moments that constitute extraordinary lives built from the ashes of dreams Victoria didn't survive to realize but made possible anyway, through sacrifice and stubbornness and love that refused to recognize death as defeat.